You sound like, oh my god, like it makes my skin crawl a little bit. Like,
Hello, welcome to the Quackcast. This is Quackcast number 380, and this is the Drunk Duck Quackcast, and today we have on Pitface, hello.
oh,
We have Fanes, hello.
Welcome you, do I.
And we have Tanserine.
Hello.
Ah, there we are. All very jovial, I like that. So today I want to talk about the topic I want to talk about is retro, going back to your old style. You know, whether there is ever a reason for that, and, you know, sometimes it can be good. So, you know, like you used to draw in a certain way, people liked it, or you liked it, and you feel like nostalgia for that, or whatever. You just want to do things in the old way. Sometimes you want bands to play in the old way like they used to do, you know, or TV series to go back to how it used to be when it was cool, or it got all crap and emo. So it's that kind of thing. Retro is the thing. But before we get into that, I've got to bring up the featured comic. And this week, Kwai did the featured comic, and it was called Android Shenanigans. So take it away, Kwai, with your Android Shenanigans.
Hello, this is Kwai Degakse, and the feature I've selected for this week is Android Shenanigans by Evode Bach, and it is rated E for everyone. This comic is set during the early days of androids being introduced to society. The comic draws parallels from the Greek story of Prometheus, as it is the same name of the head android engineer, and Zeus is a multi-billionaire big shot who is also a major shareholder of the Olympus Corporation. Prometheus works very diligently to fight for the freedom and rights of androids with artificial intelligence. The art is drawn in black and white, and it is a combination of an American comic and a manga. The first 4 chapters are now available to read, with the 5th one coming soon. Enjoy exploring a future where humans live among androids, and read Android Shenanigans by Evode Bach, rated E.
Thank you very much for that, Kwai. You gave us Android Shenanigans. Alright, so after that we have the music that Gumwallace has given us this week, and Gumwallace has given us the theme to Redneck. Redneck.
Alright, I don't know that comic.
I love me some rednecks. So this week, Gumwallace has given us the theme to Redneck. It's bluegrass dubstep, fast, tasty beats, lyrical guitar, and that bass that drops right onto your head. It's disturbing, unsettling, yet strangely compelling. So take it away, Gumwallace. And that was our music. Thank you for that, Gumwallace. Redneck.
Yeehaw.
Yes. Yeehaw! Which is a pretty cool comic. It's about rednecks and aliens. So they go together,
I got you. There you go.
They naturally go together.
Trying to capture some of that, yeah. Vintage Drunk Duck success.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. Uh,
Rednecks and extraterrestrials. Terrestrials.
it was the new movie with starring Harrison Ford and who else did they get to star in that movie?
Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig, yeah, all
I
sorts
believe.
of people. I think.
Olivia Munn, her first. No, not Olivia Munn, but Olivia.
Wow.
Olivia something was her one of her first movies, I think. You know who I mean.
What, the Tron girl? Wasn't she in Tron? Something like that.
I didn't see it. I think so, though. Olivia Wilde.
I think they had Keith
That's what it
Carradine
is.
in it as well.
Well, okay, yeah.
One of the Carradine brothers.
Man, that's a long time ago, that movie. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it started on Drunk Duck as a
Yeah,
comic,
nice.
people.
That's right. Isn't that crazy?
They conned all these big movie stars into it. Oh, jeez. We should do a feature on that. We should do it. We should bring that up.
Yeah.
It's
I wonder if
retro.
anything became of the creator of that or what became of him. I've never looked into it.
Yeah, it's weird.
Anyway, it's a whole other story. It's another Quackcast.
Yeah. So we're talking about like a retro. I came across this idea because, you'll often listen to the music of a band and you really love their early stuff and they're never going to go back there. That's in the past to them, but it's always in the present to you because you will always listen to this, this classic thing.
Yeah, man.
But for them, that's in the past. They move on, and bands do go back sometimes, and usually it's we're gonna reissue our old music, but we're gonna do it in the new style that we've got now, and it's disappointing. You don't want to hear you want to hear them do the old thing in the old ways. But I was thinking, as a comic artist, you also move on. You got a record of how you used to do stuff. And you don't work that way anymore. Like for me, I look at my old stuff and it's all in pencil and, digitally colored or whatever, paintings, all this kind of stuff. Today I work digitally. It's completely different. My style is different, everything. And I really don't want to go back. But then again, I like the look of it. So I think it would be fun to do. And it's worth it going back, I think, because you can learn you can not learn, but you can pick on some of the things that made your comic really cool in the beginning and revisit it and think about, hang on, what did I lose in the process of growing, maybe? And you can pick up on some of those things. And maybe, like a lot of the times, me as a reader, I read people's comics from start to finish and they're a record of time because they show how this person was 10 years ago versus how they are now. Their work changes and adapts, and you look at it and you think, wow, they had a really cool thing going back then. Now it's sort of sleek and it's sort of streamlined and sophisticated, but back then they had something that was really, really funky. It would be cool if they still did that. So, as a reader, you do notice that. What about you guys? What do you think about the idea of retro, going back? Reproducing.
I've thought about it too, and I've had people mention not how I did it at the very beginning, which was, Sharpie on paper, and then I had some shading markers and stuff like that. I did a little bit of that, but what I did a little bit later was the same thing, but then I would sort of cut out the characters, and then I draw a background and scan that in, and sort of fudge the background a little bit, make it a little blurry. And I had this sort of an effect of like cutouts on paper. And I've had one or two people comment that they really liked that period in the comic. They liked the way it looked and it suited the tone of the comic well. So I've thought about doing that again, but I never did. I sort of went more the digital way. And I've had people say they prefer the digital way too. So I've thought about going back a little bit, but I haven't. I kind of go back and forth. I've had that complaint about my comic. It's sort of like, it's kind of like all over the place. Sometimes it's color, sometimes it's black and white, sometimes it's digital, sometimes it's like Sharpie.
It is not. It doesn't go back and forth that much.
Maybe not that much, but sort of.
Yeah, there's been significant change in Typical Strange in stylistically. Yeah, you really do notice that over time.
I like the pages over the last 6 months the best.
Yeah, same. I like the current look.
There hasn't been any pages in 6 months.
Well, I like the current look versus the older stuff because it has sort of been advancing a lot, you know, the stylistically and you know, just the line drawing part and the color. The colors go together really well. You're using like
contrasting colors.
Well, you used to use a lot of just primary colors and they didn't necessarily fit that well.
Okay.
Things do all go together really well, and you've got backgrounds, like often you've got really good effects between those things.
Okay, cool.
I've had people comment.
I'll stick with that.
Yeah. I've had people comment on my stuff like, I like Pinky back, you know, give her like the old style. So every time I draw her, you know, I'm constantly changing her and giving her new outfits and stuff like that. And I have people saying, go back to the old style of Pinky. Just the, you know, the crazy hair and the trousers and everything like that. Just do that Pinky. So, yeah. That's why
So what do you think? Yeah.
Well, I do sort of agree. You know, Pinky's look was what made her so compelling in the beginning. So it's not a good idea to lose that, you know. So I agree with that, and I revisit it. That's her classic thing. So sometimes I feel like it's a bit of an anchor holding back the character because the whole outfit like is totally unrealistic, and which, you know, puts the comic into like an area where you can't be too realistic, you can't be too serious, because it's got this aspect of being hugely larger than life, and that's just the base. You know, she's got this crazy pink hair, all this kind of stuff, and yeah, so that defines it in a certain way, and there's nothing you can do to get around it unless you retcon it all, which I don't agree with doing. I hate retcons, so I just got to live with it. Yeah, so that's me and retro. But say, I mean, Chance, you've talked about Wolf and say you wouldn't go back to that, but you might want to do something with it.
Well, Wolf was semi-digital at the time. Like I would pencil everything, then I would scan it in and ink it and color it, which was an interesting process in general. But there is also a physical reason why I can't do that anymore. My eyes are not as good as they used to be. I have a lot of trouble focusing on a page, and everything I create now is like in 400% zoom at all times, because otherwise I can't actually focus. Yeah. So I would like theoretically to pencil sketch again, but it can only be done when I am extremely rested and it's very, very bright outside. That's the only way I can do it. So it's impractical in the first place. That's one thing. The other thing, the one thing I would perhaps revisit in a different context is that I used to have this color code, background color code. Mm-hmm. So when the characters would have strong emotions about something, or they were very shocked, or they were, you know, growing up to a strong emotion, the background would be a kaleidoscope of very specific colors indicating that. Which is something that I'm not using even without Moonlight.
Oh.
So I do think that this is a way to convey more drama in certain contexts, and I have completely let it drop. So I would want to perhaps try it again, but with a different comic. I don't think it would fit in without Moonlight at all at this point. and then how the style has evolved. But yeah, using colors, like everything, like back at the time I did it because I was not very good with drawing backgrounds. But it did sort of help make everything more vibrant when I would, have reds and oranges and rainbows happening in the background in correspondence to characters' reaction. So, yeah, that could be explored further.
Okay, all right. So you would revisit it.
Yeah, but that's the only thing I would revisit, because everything else I have a lot of fond cringing fests when I read over the comic. Like I love it because I learned a lot, but I see a ton of problems with it all the time.
Right.
So
I get what you
yeah.
mean. So if someone
It's
says,
like your dope, kinda.
"What's that?"
It's kind of like your dopey kid, like,
Yes.
oh, bless him, he's trying,
Like there are a few pages in it that I actually really like. Like I felt that they came out as I wanted them, and I would still be happy to draw at this level. But they are like it's what 120 pages. There are maybe 3. All of the other pages, I would redraw completely.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you were a band, you'd be one of those groups that went through and we're not going to remaster our old back catalogue. We're actually going to redo it and redo new versions.
Yeah. But in the same way, I mean, it has a different energy. And I was also, I have to say, I was much happier at the time. There were a lot of things that weren't happening, that are happening now in Greece in general. So there was more of an upbeat feeling in everything I created, which doesn't exist now. So I don't want to bother with it because I'm going to be making it all very grim and having people, decay while they walk from the virus and stuff like that.
The same comic.
What?
That it wouldn't be the same comic in the end.
No, not at all.
Yeah, totally.
All right, that's interesting. What about you, Pitsy, with your say Putrid Meat has changed now very much to being digital work, and it's finished. But say Blitzov is fantastic digital work, but you had an older style where you started that was way more I don't know, gritty and bitsy and scratchy. And
yeah.
Go
on. Yeah. Well, there have been changes, definitely, but I think the major change that I feel most nostalgic about isn't necessarily my switch from traditional coloring to digital coloring, because when I switched to digital, that's basically the only thing that did change was the coloring. The line work was all still done by hand, and layouts still all done by hand and everything like that. But the thing is with that line work, what I do miss is I used to be a lot looser with it, and now because of and even when I was still doing Putrid Meat, towards the end there, I got super controlled with it. I have a lot of restraints now, and a big reason why that is because I'm not arting nearly as much as I used to. Like the part where I've been most confident with my art and my technique has passed, and that's to say that it can't come back, and that's not to infer that I think I'm doing poorly either. I still enjoy it, and I still am happy enough with the things that I put out. But what I miss is not super like trying to over visualize things. Not over visualize, but like I'm trying to draw too exact. Not realistically, but too exact. I'm not being free enough with it. And to be honest, the times when I was freest with my artwork, especially in my comics, was when I was like taking classes and stuff. Like I used to take classes, what was called the Gilchrist Academy. Guy Gilchrist, who does some of the Saturday morning comics now, like Nancy and the Muppets and stuff like that are still going. He taught me a lot in that class.
Wow.
And I feel like somehow it gave me the keys to kind of be freer, because it wasn't like these hardcore rules. It was just a lot of practice and a lot of experimentation is what it was, because we were doing that in I was taking some art classes at the college as well. I was going for a degree in animation, actually, so I'm an official art school dropout. So yay! Well, not an actual art school, so I can't say that. But anyway, digressions. But those classes, because of their experimentation, helped me at that time to really express things a lot easier. Like I could sit down and I could just whip out what I was imagining on a page, and it would come out a lot more what's the word I'm looking for? Organic in a way. Organic isn't what I'm looking for, but you know, I'm like a lot more fluid and a
Naturally.
lot more. Yeah, naturally. That's it. You know, not so forced. For now, when I sit down, once again, like things are still coming out pretty much the way that I want, but I feel like there's too much cognitive work going on. There's too much. I'm overthinking a lot of things.
Yeah, it's false.
And it's making me stumble. Anyway,
I agree. Yeah. It's... Oh, God.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that your personal experience is yours, of course, but the work that you produce feels very streamlined and very much that like it has no boundaries, in a sense. Like when I the other day when I was looking through Blitzoff to pick out the pages that I wanted to showcase for the future. Actually, I was thinking about that there is this, like you have jumped off the trampoline in a sense, and you're going up. So in your, because it goes to places that it didn't feel like it would go, at least in some parts of the earlier parts. And that is my impression as a viewer, as a consumer of your art. So, yeah, I felt I had to say that.
all right. Well, thank you.
One of the things that occurs to me from what you're saying about that is, and also from you as well, Artans, is the fact that it's hard to revisit an old style because you change as a person. You're a different person. But it's not just that, it's, as you were saying, it's your circumstances were different. And you're in a different place. And that was why you did that. It wasn't just you were doing that way stylistically. There was a whole lot of things connected to that, which is hard to, impossible to replicate. So, yeah, there's many different things have an influence on style. It's not just what you choose to do, which is an interesting way of doing it. Maybe if you did copy that older style, maybe that would help to put you in that place of where you were. It could never do that completely, but it could sort of like, mentally readjust you a little bit, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. But then in the same way for me, then this goes for me only, okay? Because some people, everyone has their own reality. I don't think I would actually want to go there. Although I was happier and although I was much more optimistic about the future and much more bubbly, I would say. I think that as much as I love my past, I don't want to be a past version of myself. I don't think I would like me as a past version of myself.
Okay,
If
so
you know.
retro Tance is off the table.
Yes.
Oh, fair enough.
It's fair enough to ask too, can we be expected to go back to something as well? Like once you've moved on from something, I don't think it's really all that possible to recreate what you had from a sincere point of view. Like
Right.
from that same heart where it had first come from. It's in essence not going to be the same thing.
No. It's impossible to absolutely be the same thing. It would be contrived in a lot of ways. But you can, I think you can learn a lot from your past self and the past way and stuff.
Absolutely.
It's like
you can create like this hybrid of knowledge that you had gained before, things that you had gained before, and then combine it with what you have now. And that's great because what it does is it creates a very versatile artist.
Yeah, someone who can learn from themselves, not just other people. And one of the things, it's like the whole, the whole mythology about alternate worlds. We were talking about this earlier. I was walking down the corridor and I decided to turn this way instead of that way. But what would have happened if I turned this way? That can be the same with your art. You ended up with this style because you made a bunch of decisions, a whole bunch of decisions on like a decision tree. But if you go back down that tree, what way could you have gone if you made some other decisions? So you can sort of work backwards and maybe branch off in a new direction by doing that. So that kind of thing is theoretically possible.
I think it would affect humans the same way.
Actually, if you really consider it, though, it's impossible. The reason that you made the choice back then that you did wasn't chance. It was the result of a very specific situation and point in time that aligned just right for you to make that particular choice. It's like a chaos theory in the sense, but how? That you don't know exactly where the pencil is going to fall, but where it is falling is absolutely determined by the fraction of a millisecond or whatever, where the circumstances are such where the pencil actually falls there. And then that means that there is no way to have multiple universes in that manner because you cannot make a different choice at that particular time. You're going to make this choice, the one that you made, and then you move on. So...
Yeah, that's very true. I was just thinking, I would say, of the point of view of, okay, I made all these choices, but if I forced myself to go a different way back then, like instead of always back then I was doing these kind of drawings, and because I was doing these kind of drawings, and then I moved on to doing these kind of drawings, and then because I was doing that, I moved on to this. So you work backwards, blah, 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 blah. And, okay, instead of doing that because you were doing this, just make some kind of change. I'm talking very airily, fairly here, because it's hard to find an actual real example on the spot of this kind of thing. But you could force yourself to do something a little differently. And okay, manga. Back in the day, Pinky was going to be manga. You know, it was going to have that look. That was one of the choices they made with Pinky TA. So I did a whole bunch of, like, hundreds of sketches of how she was going to look. And she was going to be, like, more mangified. One version of Pinky, she was going to be, like, a more Chinese. That was how she was going to look. What if I went with that? What if I made her more Chinese? What if I, you know, and what kind of changes would that mean to the comic? Maybe it wouldn't be set in Russia anymore. Maybe it would be all set in China. You know?
Right.
Maybe there would be other sort of things like that. So that's an interesting example of doing it retro in that way. I don't know. Maybe you guys can think on that kind of aspect. Alternate reality Pinky.
That would be bomb to see, dude. Holy shit. I would love to see, like, I was just typing this, but the audience can't see it, of course. I would love to see, like, a little one-shot alternate reality Pinky. And because not only would that just be super cool and novel to see, but it would be interesting to see, like, for instance, if you did kind of go back to the start and alter it in those ways that would have affected the setting. I'd be curious to see the choices that you would make now.
Yeah, because things were set in motion because other things were set in motion. And what would have changed if I had done her manga? Maybe I would do all the stylizations, you know, like sweat drops and all that kind of thing. Maybe it would have been a way less serious kind of thing. Another version was going to be more tank girl, and if I went in that direction, I tried to. How would it have changed? Yeah, so
that'd be like a little more like hard edges and that kind of thing.
Stylized, and Pinky as a character herself. If she went more tank girl, she'd be, you know, someone who was more mean, to put it lightly.
Okay, right.
Nasty, yeah, it would be a very, very different comic. But those were choices I made early in the day. And yeah, things change. But look, in terms of what you have produced, you know, you go back to those early pages. I go back to those early pages and think, yeah, my pencil stylings was a very specific way of working. And now I don't work that way at all. And that produced a very interesting kind of look to the work. And, you know, the look now is totally, totally different because, yeah, of different methods, different ways. And you guys as well, you are all work more digitally than you do with pencil. I know you still do work with pencil, but Pinky is 100% digital. And it's done, like, back in the day, my work method would be things like, pencil sketch, then I might do a photocopy of that and then trace it on the other side in order to, like, refine it, or I might use carbon paper to, you know, reproduce it some other way, and then work with that. And there are all kinds of like light boxes and things. Everything would be like old school, and that's the way it would work, and that would produce a certain kind of art that I don't do now because my method is so different with digital and these programs I use. So that is why the work looked the way it did. And it's hard to think mentally of going back to that kind of work method, because there were very good reasons why I stopped doing that. The more paper you use, the more equipment you use up, it costs money to keep on buying sketchbooks. You've got to protect it. It always smudges and it's bloody dirty all the time. You've got to store it. All that, you got to scan it, which shitted me so bad. All those things that I don't have to worry about with paper anymore. I love paper. I love people who work on paper, but there are a lot of disadvantages to working with it. People only talk about the undo feature and all that. That's like a minor thing. There's much more, genuine reasons why we don't work on paper. But yeah, so that's why I stopped doing that. So, but yeah, we don't have to talk about retro stuff. If I'm sort of taking all the air out of the room here, we can talk about other things.
I do like when things revisit their own past. I mean, you're making me think of that Simpsons. Pardon me, that moment or that Halloween episode where Homer clones himself. You probably know that one, right, Oz?
Oh no, I
so
don't.
There's multiple like clones of Homer being created, and at one point it sort of pans across this huge like crowd, all of Homers, and the camera pans across, and you come to like an original Homer from the original Simpsons shorts, who's very different looking, very different sounding, and then it's like the guy who says like a line that's like hilarious, like how much they've changed and everything.
Yeah, Dan Castellaneta had a very different way of characterizing Homer with the sort of clenched teeth sort of thing. Yeah.
He talked like that actor. It was modeled after Walter Matthau.
Oh, yes.
And then the voice changed, but yeah.
The faces were a bit more rubber, the arms extended infinitely.
Oh, yeah, it was a very, like, more sort of globby looking design and everything. And that was, I like that when series, where it fits in anyway, will revisit an earlier period.
Yeah, and acknowledge it as well. Acknowledge that things have changed, which often they don't. It's just that, it's all part of the same universe. We don't acknowledge that this has changed at all, and we don't do this. Like, they visibly did it in Star Trek. We talked about it. Deep Space Nine, they revisit the old Enterprise, the Tribble kind of episode.
Yeah, they go back in time in Forrest Gump style. Maybe everybody knows about this now, but they sort of place the Deep Space Nine characters into an original series episode, the Tribble episode. That's pretty amazing. Yeah, it's great.
The whole thing with that is that they acknowledge the changes. The whole Klingons thing. Smooth. Why don't Klingons look the same now as they did then? Why do they look...
Oh, yeah. They make a joke out of it. Yeah,
we don't
so
talk
good.
about it.
Great. Yeah.
Which is a good thing, because that is talking about it. Because it's on screen. It's there. It's acknowledged, which is so cool. They didn't retcon it or reboot it. They just... Yeah, that's so cool. So... And in the reboots of Star Trek, they, it's a reboot.
Yes.
So obviously it's not good in that aspect, but it was good in that, they're going back to like Captain Kirk and all that, and they took influence from the original series, which is, Star Trek Next Generation is great. Yeah. But in this reboot movie, they have, a guy who looks like Kirk, and they have the yellow shirts and all that kind of stuff, and it was good in that way. It
was good, yeah. I thought you were talking about Discovery at first, but yeah, that first reboot was no. That first movie, the reboot was good,
yeah,
a lot of fun.
Exactly. Some they did that with Star Wars. God, we always fucking talk about Star Wars, but I always do anyway. It's my fault for bringing it up, but I just want to say that, okay, so Star Wars, the original movies, blah, 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 prequels, crap, tried to do something new, didn't work. The new Star Wars movies, they went back retro, very obviously in a lot of ways, and it worked. And they did this with Rogue One, and some other Solo, whatever. And the retro seems to work because it is a retro thing. Retro works with Star Wars because it was created in the 1970s, and it has a sort of a cool kind of thing, a stylistic influences, all that kind of stuff that really informs the look. So going back actually works for it. So that's one kind of thing where retro really does work. What about you guys? Could you name something retro that works or doesn't?
Well, I'll go back to a comedy. This is, sort of a Simpsons style comedy, like Futurama, being a sci-fi, managed to do it in its science fiction way with time travel. Multiple times they would travel back to the first episode of the series when modern day Fry is frozen, and then wakes up in the future. They would like go back and revisit that and make a more and more kind of complicated story. That really work. It doesn't just work as a comedy; it works as a sci-fi kind of thing. So I really like that. I like the symmetry or something about going back to the beginning.
Yeah, actually going back to your roots. Yeah,
or if it's not a sci-fi, yeah, like doing it in some fashion. Yeah.
Okay, that's a different take on retro. Actually,
I guess it's not quite the same thing, but
narratively, yeah. Well, no, it is. It is because I was, being an artist, mainly talking about visually, but
style.
But narratively, that's a thing as well. What direction was your story going in back then? You make choices and you went in a different way.
There's that comic called, is it Bone? Where he drew the original, or he drew the ending at the same time as he drew the original strips. And apparently, yeah, that's what I heard. I think it's Bone. I have the collection. I haven't read it all yet. But it starts off like a lot more simple, a lot more lighthearted, a lot more comedic. And then it gets apparently way more complex and serious in the middle. And then apparently, he already had created the ending. So when eventually when readers see the ending, it's very much in that original style. It was kind of always meant to be that way. It's neat. Yeah.
Speaking of retro, I might have brought up the fact that they did a reboot of Star Blazers, Space Battleship Yamato, which was one of my favorite cartoons as a little kid. I loved it. A battleship in space. So that was so cool. So they did a reboot of that in like 2012, I think it was. But instead of doing the modern thing with reboots, which is to, everything new, instead of doing that, they went back and gave the characters all the original kind of look that the characters had. They've all got the 1970s, like, animation style. They've had the 1970s hairstyles, which is so cool. Everyone has that, like, huge sideburns and, like, a huge coiffure of hair. It's fantastic. The men are they have that kind of look they had back then with the artwork. And it really worked. The whole style of it has that 1970s anime kind of thing. So back then the cartoon was very very patriotic and hopeful, we're going into space with our battleship and we're gonna beat the aliens and blah blah. We don't have that in animation these days. Things are far more nuanced, and it was so cool to see that kind of stuff again. It works to revisit that. Then they did a sequel to that reboot, and in that they took out all the gung-ho-ness and gave it the more nuanced stuff that we have these days in stories. We can't have like might makes right, or we can't have like the goodies always going forward and going to victory. We have to have it like a darker, the brass are betraying us somehow, and we're all on a fool's errand, and if we do this, what's going to happen to these people? We can save this person, but the bus falls off a cliff at the same time. We've got all these choices. Darkness. That it doesn't work with the thing. It's shit. It's fine to do work in that style, but to put that on something that was different, that was that more hopeful kind of simplistic style, it doesn't work. Just my opinion. But yeah, That's a
that could be. Yeah, I see a lot of discussion on that. That kind of phenomenon online. Yeah, lately in general, like kind of about the more almost deconstructive, or at least more nuanced, or more kind of morally relative, or whatever, like kind of thing, versus the approach in the past, which was very different culturally. It was like a cultural moment right at the end of the 70s and stuff like that, where things did change. You had a more kind of positive, a more good versus evil, like a more black and white kind of thing. And it's happened through history before, I'm sure. Like it's gone back and forth probably. Like 70s were very much, exactly, the 50s. And then the 70s are sort of famous for its kind of more nuanced, gritty, kind of maybe sometimes nihilistic kind of view of life. And that seems to have come back. And I see a lot, like there are groups of people who criticize that kind of nihilism. I mean, you could call it nuance, could be a good thing, but I see it criticized as sort of nihilist and kind of taking away something positive, you know?
It can. Complexity and nuance are great, and that can be, oh my God, that can give you layers and layers of meaning and interest. You know, there's something like a TV show like what was it, True Crime with Woody Harrelson and what's his name?
Oh, True Detective.
True Detective, yeah, Woody Harrelson. Awesome. And that other
your
guy.
Favorite guy.
Yeah.
Come on, you gotta know.
All right.
Exactly.
That guy. So that was Matthew McConaughey. That's a thing that has a lot of layers, and it's also retro in that it's going back to the 1980s. So you got all the 1980s look and 1980s style to it, but you have the modern thing with
and I would say that's kind of a 70s sort of, maybe early 80s kind of the characters, you know, like the kind of guys those guys are.
Oh yeah,
the sort of macho kind of, you know, very kind of destructive characters in a way, but you know, good people. I think good.
The story is told in a modern way of telling a story.
Yes,
and
very much.
That really works in that kind of thing. In Breaking Bad, that's a modern kind of story, and it works really well. But say for an action movie, like if you wanted to do a really good action movie, it's much better if you go back and do, you know, the whole retro thing and do an 80s version, because that works for action movies. If you want to do a more complex layered thing, that's a different kind of a film. It doesn't have the same kind of hype or, you know, testosterone or whatever you like to have. So which is a terrible kind of sexist way of describing it. But do you know what I mean? It's simplistic, and it's black and white. It's trying to evoke a feeling or whatever. Retro is a good decision to make for that kind of thing. But I'm not saying that is good. No, I'm not saying that is better than what we have now. I'm just saying it's different, and it works for certain things, and the other style works for other things. And they're both fantastic. Whatever you do is fantastic. It's not just like,
no judgment. I'm not judging.
There's not one choice or two choices. There's a million choices.
Listening to you, it's makes me think that the two tones, let's say, that you're describing, feels a little bit like one would be playing a song in a major key, or the other would be playing it in a minor key. Okay. I'm not very musically savvy in a sense, but
not at all.
It feels that way. What I would say is that the best versions I have seen are the ones that know, first of all, what they want to do, why they want to do what they want to do, and they have the good balance between both styles. Because you can have like a Chuck Norris sort of flick or a Steven
Okay.
Seagal flick, where you go full major, full, it pulls all the stops and it goes to super cartoony levels where you have the 2D heroes and the 2D villains, and you really just watch this in order to have popcorn and shoot the bull with your friends, and they are great for that, these movies.
Yeah.
And then you get on the other edge of the spectrum where you hate absolutely everyone, both the good so-called guys and the bad guys, and nobody gives you the catharsis that the story should.
Yes.
In a sense. And that also is not a good way to go unless there is a very specific reason why you are doing it. If you will deprive your audience of the catharsis that they are investing in your story to get, there has to be a reason for it. A very good reason. It's sort of like you have to question yourself. There is this rule in writing, lately at least, where they say that, okay, if you're considering writing a rape scene, you have to ask yourself first, what will this offer my story? And then, how much will my story lose if I don't include it? So that you only include this level of, like, this traumatic scene only if there is absolutely no other way for you to tell the story you want to tell and give the message you want to give. And that goes again for not giving your audience the catharsis that they should get at the end, to bring them back to balance as they were coming into your story. So I would say that if you go full nuance and like there is no sense of balance served in the end, you're going to frustrate your audiences. They're not going to like the story in the end. It's going to leave a bad taste in their mouth, and not in a way that is going to make you look sophisticated. It's just going to frustrate your audience, period. So yeah.
It's deep stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, and because I'm very nuanced.
You're very deep. Whereas Baines and I are the action hero versions of people. Cartoony, 2D.
Are you saying I frustrate you now?
Always.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I mean.
Oh God.
Sorry, but I get on my soapbox. Like, that's why I've been quiet mostly, because I tend to get on soapboxes lately. But the idea is, like, I have a story where everything is very depressing. But if I leave people by the end of the story with that depression, and I don't pay off the reason for this whole build-up, the reason for all this quagmire that I'm constantly tossing at my audience, then first of all, I will be a douchebag. Second of all, they're not gonna keep it in their minds. They're going to discard it. And that is a psychological mechanism that all of us have. Like, things that are very painful for no reason, we discard from our minds. So, yeah. And we are left with a bad taste, and we hate the author. So
yeah, it's true. That is very true. I can think of lots of things that I just lost interest in, and like okay, there was this fantastic book by Mary Gentle, and she was widely acknowledged to have written a fantastic book. It's called Golden Witch Breed, sci-fi. Very I won't spoil it or anything like that, but say this woman is a British woman. She goes to another planet that humanity has contact with, and they appear to be like a a bit more primitive of a society, and she's there as the Earth ambassador to these people, and she's finding out about the world. And you, as a reader, are also finding out about the world from her eyes. And it's really cool, and the twists and turns and stuff like that involved in this world and the characters she meets. It's really interesting and fun. And then, many years later, she wrote a sequel to it called Ancient Light, I think it was called. And she totally undermined all the positive and the cool kind of feelings that she created in the first book. With this one, it's very depressing. It sort of ends on an ending where everyone loses, and all that kind of stuff. And after reading that, you think, my God, you just ruined this. Not only this book, but you ruined the first book for me now, because this story also informs the first one. So you ruined that book and this book and yourself, because I don't like you as an author anymore after this. How could you have done that to your work, your world? So yeah, not reading any more of your books. So yeah, that can happen. So yeah, be careful. Maybe you'll have a stroppy, ungrateful reader like me. take it personally. So yeah, I thought that very much so after reading that. But okay, to take this in another way, we should finish soon, I think. But say Baines was doing about bone, so that starts off being like a comedy kind of thing, and then it gets more complex and deep. Star Wars. So there are some a lot of comic strips you'll see, and anime, which I love anime. They'll start off being
what?
News there, everyone. Bombshell. They'll start off being so just silly and light and crazy. This one I was revisiting the other day is called Heaven's Lost Property, which is the kinkiest tease anime you've ever seen. They never show anything, but the subject matter is just so kinky, and it's so funny and silly. It's crazy in the first couple of episodes, the kind of kinky silliness they go into. But then in the later episodes, they totally undercut that and hit you with these kind of ridiculous emotional layers and layers of crap. And as a watcher, you want them to go back to the kinky silliness, because that's what drew you in the first place. You don't want them to go into the emotional complexity. But yeah, that's... The other example I was thinking of was this anime called Hellsing, which you guys probably don't know about it, but lots of people do. This is something that had mass kind of fan love. So they did a series that sort of went along, and it was pretty cool and fun. And then it ended because they couldn't. It took them too long. Took the person too long to write the manga, and so they really couldn't have any inspiration or subject matter to make an anime out of it. So they stopped doing it, and the rights sort of went away, and that project ended. Many years later, the manga is finished, and they decided, okay, we're going to reboot this and redo this whole thing. So that's what they did. They produced another anime series, but what they did was, instead of just doing it in a totally new style, they redid it in the older style, which is very, very specific. It's not usual anime stuff. It looks in a very particular way, and it's cool that they did it, and it works so well because they have all these influences from the original. So yeah, going back can be a really, really good thing. It can be crap. I'm sure there are some instances where it can be shocking, but I think it could be good. Okay, I'm dominating this. I'm sorry. Okay,
This is interesting. I've actually been hearing about Hellsing from various people here and there. It's strange you bring it up. I'm gonna have to watch it.
Yeah, dude.
You should.
It's a fair point.
A very, very good take on the whole vampire thing. It's fun. It's cool. Okay, Brady Bunch movie was a good example of how to do a movie of a TV series.
Yeah. A 70s corny TV series.
Yeah, and so the movie sort of takes it, okay, we're going to put the family in the modern day, but they're still stuck in the 70s. And that
hilarious
really
movie, actually. Yeah, it was really fun.
Compare that with the Brady Bunch. I think they did some sort of movie about like a get-together of the Brady Bunch people that was, done after the series, the actual Brady Bunch actors, and that's really depressing and serious. Just doesn't work.
Strange.
So retro can, like, I'm not seeing any downsides. Before we finish this, we have to give us some retro downsides, or it can be bad. Because I'm just seeing it like through rose-colored glasses. I'm thinking it's good every single time.
The downside is when it's done in a gimmicky way. Because then it's usually pretty obvious, and it's like, all right, well, what else did I come here for? Come and I'm trying to think of some examples. I haven't been. But I'm such a
like the Lone Ranger, how they did the Lone Ranger.
Oh, I never saw that. Damn it! That's the Johnny Depp film, isn't it?
Nobody saw it.
I saw it, unfortunately.
Just you? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a Johnny Depp one. Okay. All right. Okay. That's a good example. A much loved film that everybody loved was Pirates of the Caribbean or Caribbean. Everybody loved that. Me, I didn't like it at all. That to me was retro for retro's sake. It was revisiting the old style of Disney films from the 1960s, and I thought, my God, this is so old hat. They're doing all the wrong stuff again. And, they're like adding digital animation or whatever and Johnny Depp, but it's all the old crapness bringing back, simplistic depictions of pirates that are really dumb and simplistic action and, bad costuming. Oh my God, that's so retro and bad. Bad sword fights. To me, that didn't work. So yeah, there we are. I've totally undercut my whole thing and pointed out an example where I think retro went bad, but everybody else loved it. So it's a very weak point I made.
Well, no, because just because other people loved it doesn't mean that your point doesn't count. When things are gimmicky, when they're acting a certain way just for the sake of acting a certain way, that becomes shallow and stupid. And I mean, you're not just being contrarian. This is how you actually felt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not an example that can be agreed with by most people. That's the problem.
This is an Oz tater chip.
Yeah.
That sounds delicious.
It's Oz tater.
Doesn't it? Tater chips. I love tater chips.
Best kind. Well, yeah, we are running a bit long, so I suppose you guys bring up any examples? I don't want to hurry you along or whatever, because we can.
Like bad examples, like retro gone wrong?
No, anything like retro you want to talk about.
The Avengers.
Avengers?
Not the Avengers, the superheroes. I think
the 60s.
The
Sean
yeah.
And Emma Peel and what's his name?
John Steed.
Yes. And I actually liked that old series.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. But seeing the film, which they did actually try to go retro on it, it failed miserably. I don't know why it failed so hard. maybe because they put Sean Connery in a teddy bear. But it was terrible. I think it was like the acting was, they didn't understand the retro. I think that's the problem.
Oh.
Like they tried to mimic the look without understanding the look. And it looked terrible. It looked fake, first of all, like a high school performance. And the actors didn't have any real direction on how to get the characters to work. And the script was very, let's say, mechanical. Like they fed the whole series to a computer, and they told the computer to write an episode, and the computer just spewed out a series of jokes and banter and some action sequences.
I get what you mean.
So I think that a retro doesn't work when people making it don't get the retro, why it was, and how it and how it was, why it was popular and how it was iterated.
Yeah. All right, there was another film. Oh, damn it! What was it? Yeah, you were talking about. Okay, yeah, it's The Spy Who Loved Me. Okay, so I'm talking about Austin Powers. I could not watch the first film. People loved it and think it's fantastic. I just could not get into it. Because I had grown up with the Carry On films, which are the very specific kind of, over-the-top British kinky comedies. And I'd grown up with all that stuff that Michael Myers was taking to make fun of in The Spy Who Loved Me. Well, not Spy Who Loved Me, but the Austin Powers films.
Spy Who Shagged Me.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah, Spy Who Shagged Me. So he's
just ripping off Carry On stuff. Yeah.
Carry On, The Avengers, James Bond, all that kind of stuff. And I'd grown up with it, and for me it was just felt so false and overdone and cartoonish, and I just could not get into it. It just sat with me the wrong way. So that is an example where, retro didn't work for me personally. Again, worked for everyone else.
Sure.
Well, and that's too because it was.
Okay.
I mean, you wouldn't necessarily say that those movies were trying to capture the retro feeling, would you? It was just kind of more trying to repackage it as something more modern, a more modern take, don't you think? Well, still spoofy.
They were using it.
But yeah.
And they were using the humor and, the whole thing. All these catchphrases and stuff like that were just normal 1960s, 1970s kind of things. And suddenly, it was so funny to say, do I make you horny, baby? And all that kind of stuff. And using words like shag, to me that just felt, oh well.
And was everyone saying that stuff at the time where you are?
It's in all.
Was it like anything like here?
A lot of media,
like just culturally, I mean, like were people on the street always like talking that way? And
everyone was walking around in like velveteen purple outfits and pointing at their crotches.
Oh, they took it even farther, didn't they?
Huge sideburns and glasses with thick rims.
Yes, I remember constant Austin Powers impressions at the time.
Oh yes! Oh my god!
Oh wow!
It was like, oh man, yeah, those movies were huge.
Yeah. So. It's hard to sort of bring up examples where people would agree with, but don't bring back Dukes of Hazzard. That's one thing you perhaps shouldn't do.
Right? Yeah, they did, didn't they? I didn't see them, but yeah.
Oh yeah, they did. They did with some singer, didn't they? It was Daisy Dukes.
Yeah.
Oh,
they should have used Pitface. She's our Daisy Dukes.
Well, that's right.
But yeah, that has certain things that don't work in these days. Yeah, so it can be tricky. There are a lot of things that you shouldn't bring back from the past, so that have their point in time.
Ask us before you do, because we decide all of this. What you should and
That's right.
never do, and you can never do anything that might be perceived as bad. We
That's right.
will come and we will talk badly about you on the podcast. And damn you forever for making something of less than decent caliber.
Yes.
Less than decent caliber. I like that. Oh well, we'll end the Quackcast on that. Will be the.
Meanwhile, we can't get another Friday the 13th movie, no matter what we do. They're ahead of
I
throw.
know. It'll come. It'll come when it's right. When it's the right time. We're getting a new Halloween one.
That's
Which
right.
actually, talking about retconning and all that,
Yes.
from the second movie onward won't matter anymore. We'll no longer be canon, as they say, which is interesting.
Oh my god, I hate that.
It's literally
Oh, no.
only the first movie is canon, right? They're taking away part 2
Oh no.
and everything
Yeah, I know.
else. Yeah, it's crazy.
How this will go.
So you won't have the
have-
mask anymore?
He's got the mask.
Not in the
Okay.
first movie.
Yeah, he has it in the first movie.
yeah.
Did he?
They
Oh,
don't show
shit.
it a ton. It's a lot.
I,
Like a
I
lot.
think you're thinking of.
Yeah, I am. You're right. I'm
He's
thinking
thinking
of
of
the other
Friday.
one. I get them confused. Yeah.
Our poor neglected Jason. I saw the new Hellraiser. I will talk to you about this after the show. Fuck. Here we
Yeah,
go.
okay.
The floodgates are about to open, man. I have so much to talk about. Okay.
So many things.
So many things.
You.
I wanna go back.
Ah,
Do it all over.
I saw the new Hellraiser, and it blowed mighty chunks.
It was bad.
Alrighty. Well, this has been Quackcast number 380. Thank you guys for being part of the Retrocast.